And we are live. So today we have one of my personal friends and amazing entrepreneur, Mr. John Highley, the marketing savage. So he's kind enough to share with us his story. He's going to share with us some principles that he lives by and some marketing laws that we need to follow if we want to be seen, if we want to get attention in the marketplace. So, welcome, John.
Hey, what's going on, Velco, man? Pleasure to be on your podcast, man. The Velco Academy, I love it. Using StreamYard too. I like being on this platform. It's great, good things. So anyhow, man, yeah. Well, you want to jump kind of into my story here, and I grew up in in kind of like a tough area. I was literally early on when I was a child. I was abandoned by my mother at a very early age. In fact, she was only 16 years old when she had me. And, I was actually born in 1980. So I'm literally going to be 42 years old here in November. And I can still remember, early on as a child, just knowing that I was abandoned, knowing that I was left behind. And I didn't have my biological father wasn't around when I was growing up. He was actually in prison when I was born. So
Mm.
he spent a good part of his life in prison. And that came with its own set of challenges. I always kind of looked at him as like a hero figure of some sort. And no to my surprise that later on I meet the guy and it's just definitely not what I was expecting, and an absolute letdown. But early on, I was adopted by my grandparents, and man, we lived in this little town. I like to call it like it was like a little fighting town. I mean, I just remember when I was a kid, and a lot of people can't even understand this. Like if you look at my kids, they grew up in my son. I'm sorry, my kid. He grew up in a very nice area, and never really had to fend for his own like I had to.
Yeah.
And really had it quite easy, because where I grew up, I mean, you fought your way through everything. And there was a lot of times there was groups of kids on different side of towns, and you just knew not to walk through these areas of towns because, man, they would get you, right? They'd
Yeah.
get you. I mean, unless you had your people with you, they'd end up getting you, right? And so growing up in this environment, I had to learn how to fight. I mean, it was early on in my life. I mean, God, I want to think when I was, it was like when I was 12 or 13 years old, we actually had somebody that was trying to do a drive-by on me. And there were several times where, we got out in just the right time. Thankfully, this dude and his whole crew just kept coming back from like a neighboring city. And one of my neighbors ended up chasing him down and pinning him down with a shotgun in their car. And that's the only reason they stopped coming by and trying to shoot us up, right?
Wow.
So that's the type of environment that I grew up in. And, I talk to people about this. It's hilarious. But, one of my friends growing up, I mean, I can still remember this day when I'm like 10 years old, and he's probably 15, 16 at the time. And I walk in and he's loading his gun with a pair of rubber gloves. And I'm just like, what are you doing with the rubber gloves, man? And he's like, man, you don't want to get, fingerprints on the bullets, right? So early on, I want to say that I went through the school of, criminology,
Yeah.
because most of the people that I grew up with were either criminals, crack dealers, different types of drug dealers, gang members, a lot of stuff that I grew up in at that time that really made me street smart. I wasn't so much education school smart, because I really didn't go to school that often. I didn't really like school that much. And to be honest with you, I just didn't really have a lot of respect for it. I didn't respect traditional education. I didn't really respect much of anybody. I mean, when you grow up in an environment that I did,
Yeah.
that you really, you tried to earn respect rather than give it. I mean, I know that sounds strange probably to a lot of people that grew up in suburbs and things like that,
Yeah.
but it was all about earning respect. So you never got beat up or ran over or whatever it was going to happen to you. You wanted to earn this respect so you could live peacefully, really. I mean, it was all about trying to keep yourself safe. And because of that, early on, I got involved in like gangs. I got involved in, I had a gun at a very early age and really kept a gun my entire, early existence. And I like to tell people that when I started marketing, I got involved. I was a street pharmacist. So, um, and back then, I really what I sold a lot of was LSD. It
Mm.
was a big when I was growing up, and really weed. So it was all about all the different brands, all the different types of. I don't know if you know this, but if you take all the different types of like marijuana, like there's all these crazy different strands and all this stuff. And it was all about getting hooked up and getting connected with the people that could get us the best stuff and all this kind of, right? So it's a little bit of marketing there, you know.
Yeah. Oh
But the
yeah.
thing I found out later is that drugs really don't need a lot of marketing because they're pretty easy to sell, you
Yeah.
know. At least where I grew up, I mean, it was very easy to sell that stuff.
Referrals just come naturally.
Referrals come in from everywhere. If you get some good stuff and you sell it to one person, they're going to come back like 100 times. All their friends are going to come back. And, the only thing you got to watch out for is them pesky police officers that are out there looking for you, right? So growing up in that environment, man, I learned a lot about the streets. I learned a lot about how to navigate my way around, particular situations and just a lot of street smarts. And I still contribute them street smarts to today. I mean, there's not a lot of people that can pull one over on me, get one over on me. I mean, when you grew up in an environment where everybody was trying to hustle you, you become like hustle proof, right? Like I see
Yeah.
rich guys getting hustled out of their money all the time by people. And I'm like, okay, well, that ain't me. It's cool that you like to do that, but that's fine. That ain't me, right? And so I can really see these things from afar. And they helped out a lot, later on by literally, driving out the fear of confrontation. I mean, I don't fear confrontation. I really, even owning all the businesses that I did, because later on, to take a long story short, the police kicked down my doors, dragged me out of the house. It's when my son was a very early age. He's literally 20 years old now. And when he was just born, I was in maybe it was like a week after he was born, I was taken to jail. And at the time, I got popped for trafficking LSD. And so I went through the court systems, all these things, and ended up coming out the other end of that and just decided that I didn't want nothing to do with that life anymore. I seen that I had a son there. I had responsibility. And the way this stuff works, so like I told you, he was just born about a week, prior to that.
Yeah.
But the way this stuff works in the state of Ohio was the crime that I committed was literally like a year before then. So it was before, he I even got who is now my wife, pregnant. It was committed a year before that because they got to go through, when it's a felony like that, they got to go through like an indictment process.
Yeah.
So a year later, after, here I am, I already cleaned up my act. I got a kid on the way, cleaned up my act. I had a job, I had all these things going. And then here, what happens to us in life, right? Something from our past comes out and gets us right as we're moving ahead, right as we're, moving forward. Something just comes from our past and snags us up. Actually turned out to be one of the best things because, I'm a born again Christian now. And I actually, when I went to jail that time, there was a guy there who would always come and preach to us. He was an older gentleman, and he always came in and he would preach to us in jail. And he went to this little Baptist church that was down the road from my house. And I don't know what it was about that time, but his message just hit me different. His message just came to me different. And I think it's because I wanted real change. I wanted meaningful change. I mean, I was so sad. I mean, there's many times I went to jail and I would just go in there and play cards and, whatever, hang out with people. I mean, you had 3 meals and was a pretty big dude at the time. I was already a
I
wrestler.
want your fruit cocktail.
Yeah, I was already fighting no holds barred and stuff like that. I didn't have a lot of problems when I went to jail. I also had the street credit of my my biological father, who I had already made a name of being a really tough dude in prison.
Oh.
And so people were scared of him. They didn't want to eventually do something to me and then end up in one of his prisons. So, there was like all these things going for me in jail, right? Like I had all these amazing things going for me in jail. But this time I went to jail and I was just so sad. I had changed my life. I had a really good job at the time. I actually got hired at a place called Dan and Yogurt. Anybody eats Dan and Yogurt? This place was like a half an hour outside of where we had lived. It was in this little country town. And I got hired there. And back then it was like really good, Velko. And you're going to laugh at this because you know how many businesses I own now and all these things. I was going to be making like $22 an hour. And I was so excited about that back then. Right. And it's good money, especially for a kid. I was just like, wow. And especially at that time, who knows what they pay now? I mean, maybe $30 an hour, something like that. So I was going to be making $20 some an hour. I just really had plans for our life. I'd changed. And then this thing came out of the past and haunted me and got me. And I knew that I lost my job because I was on the way to work when they got me. So I was driving to work and the sheriff, pulls me over. He runs my license plate. And all of a sudden I noticed that he's got his gun pointed at me. They issued a warrant for my arrest and they got me that time. The very first time. So here's what they do when they catch you for trafficking. The first time they come and they kick in your doors and they drag you out, but you're not even charged for the charge yet. They just do that to scare you and they get like a warrant, a search warrant. And what they do is they bring you into jail and they try to turn you into a snitch. So you know,
Don't know
they
where you got it
go to
from.
jail, and and where I came from, you don't snitch. You just don't. You don't become a snitch. And everybody knew that, something the people that are snitching, they really don't fully understand is that what happens is you become a snitch and then they just get rid of you and they throw you in jail with the people you snitched on.
Yeah.
So, and we all knew this, right? So we seen it happen to people. And I mean, it was like a rule. You don't do that. So long story short, about a year later, I'm getting my things together and I get pulled over, and this cop, pulls me over on the way to work and like just, has me on the ground, the whole 9 yards, calls in other police officers, handcuffs me, takes me in. Yep. I have been indicted for trafficking LSD. And the place that I was indicted for was right outside of Dayton. So I sold it. I actually drove outside of Dayton to sell it, and I was in a different county. And in that county is a very little, small, conservative county. And there's those judges there that like literally feel like if you take one hit of LSD, you're going to go brain dead. So they don't really look at this drug as being a good thing that you're a trafficker of it, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know. I mean, I probably ate 1,000 hits, and it may be the reason why I can think the way that I can today, right? I can really think outside the box now, guys. So don't recommend the way that I did it, but hey, it's an option. So so I end up going and getting out of jail, and I hired an attorney, and they basically just reduced it down to probably like one of the lowest level felonies. And to be honest with you, when I went there and met with the pastor, and when I went there and I lost that job, them are like the two best things that could have ever happened to me. Because when I got out, I went to work for myself, and built a business. And it took me a long time, but I was making way more money than $20 an hour, right off the bat. And I also came to Jesus and I came to God. So, sometimes God's got to like stop us and be like, that Danning yogurt. I mean, I couldn't even imagine if today I still worked at Danning Yogurt. No offense to anybody who works at Danning Yogurt, but that was not my calling. I mean,
Yeah.
I would go and I would work hard any place that I went. I was always a hard worker, but that wasn't my calling, right? So God actually steered me out of that, and I had to go through a little bit of trouble, a little bit of pain. It was a potential 10-year prison sentence that I hired probably one of the best attorneys in probably one of the best in the United States, actually. And he was able to, get me out with relatively, probation and, a few other things like that. Right. So I come out, and I still remember to this day when I went out and trained to become an automotive technician. So I ended up becoming an automotive auto body technician. And when I went out and trained, I still remember I had to go literally fly out to California, go to the sheriff's department, and have them sign this piece of paper that I had to give my probation officer. So, and when I flew back, I had to give it to her and let her know I went out there for education and all these kind of things. So, and just the little things that you remember, but that was the start of my career. And we ended up starting our business, our mobile automotive business, in a 900 square foot apartment. We were paying $365 a month for this place. My grandmother co-signed for back then it was a 1998 Ford Expedition. We got some logos put on the windows and this kind of thing. And then off I was in business. I was driving from place to place, driving from car dealership to car dealership, from auto body shop to auto body shop, from detailing shop to detailing shop. And it took me like 8 years before that business actually took off. And a lot of it was my fault. I mean, I spent a lot of my days, I would go over to my brother-in-law's house and we would drink beer, get drunk, cook out on his grill. Like it was really, I would only work certain days out of the week, so a lot of it was me, just my fault. It was self-inflicted.
Just celebrating a lot of random
Yeah,
things.
yeah, celebrating a lot of random things. And I started to realize at one point, I'm like, man, the alcohol is really a problem. I'm like
Yeah.
getting drunk during the middle of the day and, all these kind of things. And I was going and playing golf with him more than I was actually working. And, it was a situation, man, is what I got to tell you. It was a situation. It took me a long time to learn this stuff. And I say this to encourage some of y'all out there. I mean,
Yeah.
my whole story is basically, if this guy can do it, I certainly can, right? Because we later on, I'm going to get to it here in just a moment, but eventually I owned seven businesses. At my height, I owned 7 businesses, and all of them were making, anywhere from 7 to 8 figures. And, but it all started as this guy who started out as a drug dealer, who lived in a really shitty area, who got into a lot of fights, who went to jail. And then even after I got saved by Jesus, like Jesus is chasing me down because I'm drinking all day long. Right. So, it took me a long time to learn Velcro, and I put my wife has been with me since the beginning. I mean, we've been together 22 years now.
Wow.
And I just commend her. I just tell her, like, I bought her a whole vase of roses the other day, and I'm driving back from church with my son, and I hand them to him, and I say, yeah, I was like, your mom deserves them. And then we were talking about her car, which she got this really badass car. Her car's nicer than mine, and she got this badass car, and we were talking about her car, and I'm like, well, she deserves that too. And I'm like, because she had to put up with me and everything that I put her through, right? And I mean, and she hung on there. She's old school. She was in there with it, man. She's like, the type of woman that I needed, because man, did I put her through every imaginable scenario and situation you could possibly put somebody through.
Wow.
And she still hung on and still stayed there and still believed in me and all these things, right? And granted, I'll tell you, when I was driving around doing all this drinking and hanging out with her brother like half the day, she was at work working at Even Flow as a customer sales rep, answering the phones and all this, and making pretty good money over there, right? So I had this little padding going on where she didn't know what I was doing half the day, and I wasn't telling her, right?
Yeah.
And so it just made for an interesting, do I want to work today or do I not want to work today, right? So that was the beginning of where I started at in business, and what had happened to me. I stopped drinking, and when I stopped drinking, I just stopped hanging out with people that were doing that. Like I stopped hanging out with her brother all the time and started getting really serious with business. But I decided that I wasn't going to let it rule my life, right? I wanted to kind of make up for some of the lost time and spend more time with my son and spend more time with my wife. So we ended up doing our business where I worked 4 days a week and I would take 3 days off. Okay. We would go do family stuff and all this kind of stuff, right? And we ended up doing that for about a year. And that was literally the first time in business. And granted, this is like 7 years into it that I actually started, making, six figures, right? So I'm literally making, $3,000 a week. Some weeks I'm making 2,800. Some weeks I'm making 1,700. But on average, we did over six figures in that year, me working only 4 days a week. And back then, I mean, that was just great money. I mean, that's good money now, but I mean, that was just great money back then. And we were able to do things. And all of a sudden, something happened and called a giant hailstorm came through our area and ended up demolishing, I think it was over 100,000 cars.
Wow.
And I was in the automotive industry. So overnight, my little 4 day work weeks that I enjoyed so much turned into 7 day work weeks, turned into staffing a location with nearly 100 guys, and then just turned into, which would have been our first like a $25 million year, which was just, just unthinkable. A lot of it went out in payroll, right? But we still stood and made millions that year. So we went from hundreds of thousands to making millions. And it just happened overnight. And I can still remember this to this day. And I believe that I'm speaking to somebody out there that needs to hear this. Okay. They need to hear this. There was a breaking point in that year where it was the very first month that storm hit. And I had people calling me. I had, four body shops that I was accountable for. I had multiple other locations that we were pulling cars from. I was accountable to staff this entire storm. And here we got a place that's set up with about 1,000 cars in it waiting to be fixed. And I got people coming and going and teams leaving and going. And it was probably one of the most stressful times of my life. Like every day it was like, I don't know what's going to go wrong, but I can guarantee you 10 things are going to go wrong. Maybe one thing's going to go right. And it really seemed hopeless at a certain point. It was like, how am I even, I almost like said, I'm going to give up on this and just go work. Like, I don't want this responsibility. I don't want people to be sending all these things to me. I'm going to go into one of these shops and I'm going to say, guys, you guys handle this. I don't want it anymore. I'm just going to show up here every day. I'm going to clock in, I'm going to clock out, and I'm going to work. That's it. And it almost got to that breaking point, right? And something inside of me just wouldn't give up. Something inside of me just wouldn't give up. And I remember standing there one day. I mean, I was like terrified all the time. It was like every time my phone rang, I'm like, oh shit, no, not again, right? No, my phone rang. Oh no, like this is gonna be some bad news again. And then I remember standing there. And have you ever had like a serene moment where you just like maybe you walk outside your house and everything just gets so calm? And you have that moment where just over top of your body, you just feel like you've been touched by the hand of God, and you feel like all the stress just relieve out of your system, and you feel this like very calm, tranquil moment. I mean, you could literally be standing there looking at a tree, or you notice a bird, or it could happen on vacation as you're standing out and looking at the ocean. I can remember standing there in front of what would be one of my locations later. And I just felt this tranquil feeling come over me. And all of a sudden my phone rang, and it was an old manager of mine that had worked at another location and said, "Hey man, I was in my hotel. This kid gave me his number and wanted me to give it to you." So I called this kid, and his name's Dusty Randall. And I ended up calling up Dusty. I'm sorry, Dusty Clark. So I ended up calling up Dusty, and I'm like, "Hey, man, yeah, I do need workers, of course, because they're all leaving me all the time right now, So it's like, yeah, of course I do. Well, he brings in this killer crew of guys. And from that moment, just all my problems were solved. And it was almost like unrecognizable. And I believe that this happens now today. Any business that I launch, anything that we grow, anything that we do, I always look to experience what I call the dip. And I'm waiting for it now, because every business that I've ever built, we experience this dip. Okay. And this dip is the moment where you're going, and all of a sudden you're going to dip lower than you think that you can possibly ever stand. Usually your 2 feet, your 2 feet are across the line of failure. And if you stick it through the dip, that means you're about ready to skyrocket to the next level. It's always a test. And anybody who's done some major deals, they know that they're always in it for that dip. It's almost exciting now. Like, I almost, at this point now, when we hit a dip, like my wife, what she's always asking me, she goes, "What are," like, because she's in the middle of some of these situations with me, and when we do different businesses or different business deals or even launch things for other people. And she's like, "Well, we've already experienced the dip." I'm like, "Well, no, we haven't. Not here, not in this thing, not with this thing." So I'm always telling her, I'm like, "This is the dip. This is it right now." And I start to get excited when we're in that moment where it seems like everything is about to fail. And I just inherently know that something's going to happen to pull everything through. And I'm here to tell you guys that is the burden of success. But if you've done it over and over and over and over again, eventually you just start to expect it, And I know I'm speaking to somebody out there.
You're speaking to me, brother.
Yeah. And yeah, absolutely. And so little by little, we ended up having this huge year, which later grew on to become a franchise, which later grew on to, like, a bunch more years. And to make a longer story a little bit shorter, is that we went on to go into the educational field inside of that industry. And we ended up taking over the educational field. And then we ended up moving into manufacturing and tool building, all at the same time, by the way. It wasn't like I went one thing to the other. Like, we had the automotive thing going. Eventually we had multiple locations. We turned it into a franchise. And then all of a sudden we got into, it went on into the education. So I was like, okay, well, if we're fixing the cars, let's record the repairs and then let's sell it as education.
Right.
And when we ended up getting a lot of business through our YouTube channel early on, we were one of the early pioneers in the YouTube days. And we were the beginning at Facebook with all this stuff on the very tip of the spear. And we've done everything you could possibly imagine on Facebook. And then going into every single other platform, we grew these things on these platforms. And then we were like, okay, well, if we're teaching them how to do it, we're doing it, number one. We're teaching them how to do it, number two. Well, let's go ahead and build their tools, because we see some things that are wrong out there. We see some things that could help guys with their joints and their wrists and all these things. So let's go ahead and add this to our arsenal. So we started manufacturing and selling tools. We ended up getting a 6,000 square foot manufacturing facility, and we started manufacturing, shipping, all made right here in America. I know a lot of people say made in America because that's where they put the stamp on the tool, but we were cutting them and making them right here in America. And that's something that, that still today, my tools are all made, cut right here in America. In fact, I'm in a licensing deal with that whole business now, which is phenomenal. And they're being cut right here in Texas now. And we were cutting them in Ohio, but now I live in Texas and we're cutting them here in Texas. So we said, okay, well, we got the tools. Well, we got the tools. We're doing the thing. We got the education. So now let's go ahead and show them how to market their business. So we started having these things called the mega media events. And we started bringing in photographers, videographers, and, all of these people. And then we started getting all the technicians to come in from all over the country to fly in for a weekend. And we started taking their photos, taking their videos, creating marketing material for them that they could go out and use for a lifetime. I mean, there is thousands and thousands of technicians today in that field that use all of our marketing materials now. And I mean, it was so good back then that it's so good now, right? And then during that time, we would actually have speakers come in, usually industry speakers. I love that when you can bring industry speakers to industry people, because now you're getting real world examples of what actually works, right? So we were like, okay, well, now we're doing the advertising, right? So we ended up opening up Hail ads, and we started advertising, like physically running the ads for them. And then we ended up opening up Best Website Edit, where we started building all their websites and started doing all their websites for them, and building all of their marketing funnels and all of these things. And that all stemmed from like one core business. And I really think that a lot of people need to think about this, because technically what happened there was we enterprised. We essentially took one core business, meaning that we had the actual the process. We were doing the process. We were doing it, so we knew a lot more about it than somebody from the outside. Like we would have
Right.
these other marketing companies would come in, or tool companies would come in and try to sell tools to guys, and they didn't even know how to do what the guys were doing, so they didn't know what the guys needed. So we already knew what the guys needed, so we could develop the best tools. And then we already knew what marketing worked because we were doing it ourselves.
Yeah.
We were able to set up best marketing, and so there was nobody who could compete with us, because we were actually doing it. And not to mention, we had the respect of all the guys out there, because we were actually working side by side with them in the trenches. So, it was a combination. And I want people to think about that, because what we're really talking about is enterprising. And what that means is you got one core thing that you do. Like, what other things could be done out of that? I mean, I'll give you an example of that. I got a friend who has an auto body shop, and he got really good SOPs, which are standard operating procedures. He starts selling them. He starts selling his SOPs to other body shops. I mean, you know how many of them wanted to buy that? An incredible amount of them wanted to buy that, because the hardest thing to do in business is to actually get an entrepreneur to sit down and dump things out of his head that are SOPs.
Yeah.
Right. And that's, for you guys who don't know what that is, that's standard operating procedure. And it's one of the places I see most businesses get stuck, where they can't scale because they can't train anybody. And they're trying to take everything out of the one guy's head and teach. It's all right if you teach maybe 10 people, but I know for a fact by the time you get to 100 people, that you can't do it anymore like that, right?
Even if you have a great team, you will ruin your team if you don't have direct communication and exact expectation on how you want things done. And
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, you got to start looking at your business as, what other things could I sell? What things could I sell that would market position me as being an expert in the industry? Because, here's what I can tell you is that for just our automotive shops alone, once I started, my face was all over YouTube. And once my face was all over the internet, and there was other tool companies at the time that were making tool sets in my name. So the tool set had my name. It was like the John Highley custom version. I would pick out all the designs and all that stuff. So people started naming their tool sets after me. And all of these things started happening. I was able to display that down to even the customer level, the client level of people that were coming into our business. So the people that were even outside of the industry, like, the locals and things like that, when they came in, they seen my picture on, with a set of tools that was named after me. So it's pretty obvious to them that this guy's pretty doggone good at what he does, if one of these tool companies is going to name the whole set of tools after him, right? So there was things that we would do at that point to market position. And then I would have a poster of our educational platform. And I was always on the front of the website. And I had posters created of our launch date. So people would look at that and say, well, gosh, if he's an educational expert in that industry, surely I want to leave my car with him and his team, because surely he educated everybody, right? So there started being like all these other benefits that I really didn't know was going to happen. Being a marketer, I knew that I was going to really, even down to the point where if you've got an industry podcast, here's an example that even if you're featured on a podcast, man, I would have that on your front page of your website. An example of that is I got a truck that I want wrapped, and I was looking around at a couple different wrapping websites, and there's one that specifically caught my eye, and I scrolled down, I noticed that there's a podcast. He's on a podcast. And right off the bat in my mind, I say, well, if this guy's good enough to be on a podcast, like somebody in his industry is going to want him in a podcast, then surely he's better than the guy who just doesn't even give a shit about his, this guy's like in his industry, and people think that way. And you always want to position yourself that way. So the more involved you get, or the more things that you sell, or the more things that you're out doing, like in your actual industry, you serve to market position yourself to clients and customers, to not just think of you as a commodity anymore. Anytime somebody comes to me and they go, well, the problem is people are always price shopping, and customers are always price shopping. As soon as I hear that stuff, all I hear is I did not do the work needed to distinguish myself from anybody else. So that's all that I hear when people say that. They're just saying, I didn't do the work needed to make myself any different than the guy across town. So the only thing the customer has to choose from is price,
Right.
right?
Well, I want to run something by you because I've done tremendous research on my end, and we are 100% relational, not transactional. My selling style is buyer oriented, not so much deal oriented. You know what I mean? Because sometimes some deals, when you work in business to business, some deals are not worth the headaches. You know what I mean? So if it's not a complete match, sometimes it could backfire on you. So based on my observation, if you, and I know you looked at more industry than just body work and automotive. I know that since then you've been building websites and funnels for other businesses as well, so you've been familiar with other industries.
Yeah. So, yeah, for
Uh,
some reason my camera went off. I don't know why that happened, but
uh, what I wanted to run by you, are you coming back soon? You are.
so yeah. So what you said there is simply that yes, and you're right. We own the Marketing Savage now, so I probably should have mentioned that because I definitely want people to know that we own the Marketing Savage. But yeah, so we work with all kinds of businesses. I mean, thousands of different industries. And or thousands of different people in a bunch of different industries, and we take on any kind of industry, and we build websites from everything: roofers, plumbers, people who need funnels built out for their educational platforms, all the way to accounting companies, and just about everything in between. And and what was your question about it being relational?
Yeah, so in my observation, if you take, let's say, the automotive industry or the or medical field or engineers or lawyers, even police officers, any industry, if it's represented, if 100% of the people involved are represented by 10 people, I believe that three of them are straight up criminals. They get in just so they could make as much money, and they actually experience pleasure when their clients are suffering, when their clients are struggling, when somebody overpays or someone is not educated. They actually enjoy that, and they constantly look for new leads. So 30% have malicious intention, and then there's about the same amount, maybe 20% or 30%, another two or three people that are just, they just don't belong in that industry. They're either checking it out or somebody else led them into the industry, and now they're there. So they're running on two cylinders. They're not investing in self development. They're not really they don't really have the best attitude because they're one foot out, one foot in. They're not giving 100%. So it's hard for them to compete. And now we have 60% of bad stewards. And we talked a little bit about stewardship, and I know that this is something that you care about, and this is something certainly I care about. So we have 60% now who we have to watch out for. And I think that's with doctors, with lawyers, with plumbers, with everyone. And then you have another group of people, about 30%, so three more people, if 10 represent 100, that are wolves in sheep's clothing. So they will be like, our core values are integrity. We take care of our team first, right? But they, behind the scenes, they have struggles with the gray area, and they sometimes play the game by cheating here and there. So now we have 80% that are not really good stewards, and then there's 1%, one person or 10%. I call that the niner, who is these 10%. They have very good intention. They're very, very, very good. Their moral compass is in the right direction, but they just lack the education because they work with people from the other categories, and they have almost surrendered to this gray area, and they struggle in their environment. They're telling themselves a story why they should be there, and it's only because they don't know an alternative on how to do business the right way. And then there is 10%, the final group of good stewards. And by being a good steward is exactly what you described. You didn't just stay in delivering what you already do so well, and scale your business that way, but you wanted to support the struggle of the industry. You wanted to improve the industry. You basically became the face of the industry and a maverick that creates new ways and new roads. And I believe you just described what I call steward, a great steward, in my theory of 10. So that's why I want to say thank you for that. And I feel that you were just a great steward for your industry, and that's why they named the tools after your name. They trusted you with the education. They trusted you with the marketing because they saw that you care. You can't fake that energy. They saw that you care.
And I appreciate that, my friend. And is the question like, how do you find that top 10%? Or, I mean,
And they usually get 90% of the opportunities, and the other
of course,
90% compete for what's left over.
of course. No, that's no, okay. Now I get what you're driving home there. Yeah, absolutely, man. And, it's so interesting because, and what I got to say out there, because technically the way you broke it down, so 9 out of 10 people that are listening to this podcast are probably in that category.
Yeah,
Where,
exactly.
let's just be honest here, right? Let's be honest with everybody here, and let's take a moment to get real, right? Because a lot of the people listening to this are probably like, man, I don't want to like deal with the person in sheep's clothing. I don't want to deal with this carnal person who just
Yeah.
doesn't have passion and is doing what everybody else is doing. Like, how do I find that top 1% person that like I can deal with, like when I'm purchasing or when I'm getting business coaching or when I'm going to get a simple service or a great sandwich by a sandwich artist or whatever that looks like. How can I be that person? And I'm gonna go back to there was one day I used to do a little bit of coaching. I don't do as much of it now, but I had a coaching client and we were sitting there talking and he was just complaining to me. He was just basically saying that, like all these people are like flaky that he's dealing with. Like all of his customers are just flaky. And, he sends over an invoice and then he's always got to get on them to pay it. And then sometimes they will, sometimes they won't. And he was just going on and on about how they show up and then they don't and this and that. And I stopped him and said, hey man, let me tell you something, bro. I'm like, I know this is going to hurt your feelings, but you know that I'm here to hurt your feelings. Right. And I said, here's the problem. Like what you just described is who you are.
Hmm.
Because I still remember you taking the times to pay your invoice and us going like, why hasn't he paid it yet? And I remember you dragging your feet. You are the exact type of person you've rescheduled with us before. You're the exact type of person that you're describing.
Yeah.
So
How you buy is how you sell.
yeah, here's what happens. Whatever you are, you're going to be attracted to them same characteristics. Whatever you are inside is what you're going to receive. Whatever you reap in your life is what you're going to sow. So what happens is you got these people that are out there, being one of these categories of whatever it is, and they're just receiving that in return from everywhere, right?
Yeah.
So literally they're out there amplifying this thing. They're living much lower than their potential. And they're just receiving the exact same thing in return that they're putting out to the world. And I want everybody on this episode to really hear this because you have to become the type of people that you want to do business with.
Yeah.
If you want people to be honorable towards you, you have to become honorable and you have to be willing to do it. And let me tell you something. People get mixed up with that word honor. I was talking to a guy one time and I said, I was telling him, I'm like, dude, your problem is, he's like, what? I'm like, you don't honor your wife. You're sitting here telling me this and that, but I don't even hear one little word of honor. And that's like the one thing that we're supposed to do with our wives is we're supposed to honor them.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, that means to hold them in high esteem. Okay. And I looked at him and said, you're not doing that right now. And he goes, well, because this is the way she is. And these are the things I said, whoa, hold on for a second, man. I said, because you're mistaking the word honor like it's some sort of trade or something like that. Like for you to become an honorable human, that you have to be honored first. I said, that's not the way it works, bro. You honor people because you're honorable. Okay. It's not about what they do. It's not about who they are. It's who you are.
Yeah.
This is the thing I learned, and I told you guys all that I'm a born again Christian. I'm really deep in it. I mean, I do the Church of the Savage now. I've got a church right here in the state of Texas, but I just do it online right now. It's incredible. It's been just great. And, one of the things that I learned about God is that God gives us promises, not so like, a lot of times in life, we'll promise somebody something so they'll do something, right? I'm going to promise you this so that way you're nice to me, right? Or whatever it is, right? God doesn't do that. God promises us things to show us who he is. Okay? Has nothing to do about us, has nothing to do about our reaction. It's his promises are good and gold, as good as gold. And that's the same way it is with honor. So there's going to be a lot of times in business where it's like, okay, you want everybody to be honorable to you or hold you in high esteem, but you're not willing to go out and honor anybody.
Yeah.
You're not willing to live as a man of honor. You're not willing to just take hold of your household first and start honoring your wife. But you want to go out and be honored by society? Sorry, man. That's not the way that it works.
Usually the people that complain the most are from that second group of the people that are either just checking it out, or they're not living their purpose. They're trying to take advantage of the industry, trying to use the industry, not specifically with malicious intent, but they underestimate the amount of effort they got to put in.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, look, there's lazy people, bro. You know what I mean? We just called that lazy, and that they're going to get what they return. They're going to get that in return. I mean,
Well, if you go ahead.
Like I was talking about earlier, man, you got to choose your hard. I mean, it's hard. It's hard to get up and do hard work, but it's hard to be lazy because now you got to live with regret.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, it's hard to be fat, but it's hard to work out. That both of them are hard. One of them you got to live with. And so it's all about all the time. We're going to be choosing our hards. What hard do we want to, have it self-inflicted? Do we want to delay the gratification so we can live a great life? Or do we want to give in to every whim and, every feeling that we have
And live with the consequences.
and live with the consequences of that? It's so interesting. An old preacher up in Lubbock, Texas, a buddy of mine, who's a mentor of mine, said he went into this old preacher up in Lubbock, Texas, into his office, and there was a giant piece of lead on his desk. And my friend's Keith Kraft. He's a good friend of mine. He's my one of my business coaches.
He's awesome.
Mentor. Yeah, he's an awesome dude. And he was telling me about this, and there was a big piece of lead, like a bar of lead, on this guy's desk. And Keith looks across the desk and says, "What is that?" And the guy says, "Well, that's for somebody when I tell them to do something, and they come in and they say they weren't led to do it, and they didn't feel like they were led to do it." So he would tell them to grab that piece of lead, and they would hold it in their hands. And he says, "Do you feel led now?" And he'd say, "Well, now go do it." Because the truth of the matter is, everything that we should do, we're never really going to feel like doing it.
Right.
There's not a day where I wake up and I say, "Man, I just I'm just be straight up with you. I don't get excited to go to the gym. Like, I go to the gym every day, but I don't just wake up, roll out of bed, woo, I get to go to the gym today."
Right.
Every single day I got to fight this little battle in my head that says, "Man, you could just go lay back down," or, "Man, you got too much going on. You should just go, do a little bit of work instead." I got to fight this battle every single day. I don't ever feel led to go to the gym. But do I know that it's good for me? Do I know that it's good for my body? And do I know that it's what I should do?
Yeah.
What you should do never comes from your feelings. What you should do comes from a very logical place. It comes from the truth that's inside of you. And a lot of times, you're not going to feel like doing any of that truth because the truth is hard.
That's powerful, brother. That's powerful.
It's a lot easier to it's a lot easier to feel or it's a lot harder to feel your way into an action than to act your way into a feeling. Much, much harder. Because if you feel your way into an action, you got to wait till you feel like it. But if you act your way into a feeling, you're going to do it. You're going to do it. And when you start acting, so there's a lot of times I'll sit down and be like, I can't feel my way into this situation of wanting to work. Because if I sit here and I'm led by my feelings, I don't want to work. I'll just sit here all day. I'll pick up my phone, start scrolling TikTok, get into a reel hole for a little while. I'll, decide to go eat something out of the fridge. I'll do anything to occupy myself other than actually work.
Yeah.
So I've got to act my way into a feeling. And trust me, once you get going and once you start moving and once you start doing things, you'll eventually feel like what you're doing is right. But there's that moment of resistance between, the way you feel right now and actually getting into the groove and doing the thing that you know that you need to do. So I mean, it's a battle for me every day, and I think a lot of people can relate to that. So every single day, I am forcing my will upon myself and making myself do the things that I need to do.
Yeah, that's really powerful stuff. The other thing that you mentioned earlier was how you got into education, into your in your industry, and I've always believed that there are four types of teachers. And the first type, we've all experienced that parents usually are that type, those teachers that feel obligated to teach you regardless if they have any capacity or expertise on the topic. Like parents would do that, or best friends would do that, or someone who feels partially responsible for you would do that, or someone who had had failure in that industry would try to protect you. So those teachers are usually the worst, and they would give us advice that is definitely not practical or godly or in any way beneficial to us. And the second type of teachers are teachers who are theorists. They have theory about, they read few books, there's a theory about doing things. Sweet.
Yeah. So apparently the red thing was off on my camera for whatever reason. So I'm back.
So the second types of teachers are teachers that are based on theory, and there's so many of those online right now. People that have just learned a system and they're passing it on. There's actually online coaches that teach online coaches how to become online coaches using their system of becoming online coaches. So it's like those teachers are probably not the most effective as well. And then we have the third group I call witnesses, kind of like Napoleon Hill. He witnessed Dale Carnegie. He witnessed greatness. And they would usually give you good information, but they're not able to be mavericks. They're not able to start new ways, because
Yeah.
the creative side is not there. They're very good students. They're very good following the law and good observance, but they don't have that missing element that make them um, be bold enough to start something new. And then the final type of teacher is the people who are actually doing it. So that just confirms everything that you said earlier, and I try to learn from those type of teachers that have what I want, teachers that know what I'm looking for, teachers that are living the life, you know that I strive for, and teachers that have experience, because those type of teachers can catch you in a moment, even if they've never experienced that in their own career, in their own life. They're able to adjust and give you a good advice based on, because they have the capacity to understand the situation.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, you're absolutely right. What you're talking about is the difference between knowledge and wisdom.
Hmm.
Knowledge is something like if you ask me to give, you stock advice, and I went and found a article about Warren Buffett, and I just sat here and read it to you.
Yeah.
That means that I received some sort of knowledge and just was like a conduit and just read it to you, right? It's not like Warren Buffett sitting across from you and looking at the situation and letting you know all of the tiny little pitfalls and the small little adjustments that actually make all the difference when it comes to navigating through a situation because he's already been there. You see, wisdom comes from us already being there, already being through all these situations and being able to get out of to work our way through them. I was talking to a guy earlier who had bought one of our website systems, and I give like a 1 hour coaching call with these guys, and he wanted to go into franchising. What happened to be I've already been in franchising, so I already had wisdom in that situation, and I was able to quickly to guide him to the right attorneys. I was able to give him the downside, the insights, and the outsides. Now he could have went and read a Google article, could have done all of these things,
Yeah.
but you could just tell when I'm in that conversation with him and really explaining in deep detail of how it looks, what the benefits are, the little things that he could do in his specific business that I knew would make all the difference. Now, even though it was in a different business, like he was in the gutter business, and that's like the seamless gutters. So this guy's growing a great business, and he wants to get into franchising it, and he's in this gutter business. And I was able to take some of the things that I learned in my franchising experience and say, hey, man, here's what you do. Don't kill them with the top percentage because I was like, what's your margins? Like 35%. It's like, well, that's pretty good. That's pretty good margins, for, you got supplies and all these kind of things, right? Like, and in labor and, all these things. And I'm like, but you realize if you try to charge them like 10% off the top, that's like 30%. Like there's no reason for them to ever to buy it from you, right? And I was able to explain that to him that, 10% off the top is huge with only a 35% profit margin because now there's no money to even run the business. So there's no point of even having it. Right. So we were able to talk this through and explain to him, from a business perspective, it was never about percent because if you have a business that has a high profit margin, then that percent can be higher because you're not going to kill the other person's business, by charging that, killing your business in turn. Right. So there was a lot of little things. Then I was able to tell him that, some of your supplies and stuff like that, you could literally, you can make money off of that. You can be the distributor for these
Yeah.
products and supplies, kind of how Subway does. And that's how I modeled my business. One of the ways I modeled my business and was able to really explain that to him. So you're really talking about the difference between, knowledge and wisdom. Now there is also some power and accountability. So I'll give you guys an example. So I literally have 3 business coaches that I work with, and they're here. One of them is a very spiritual business coach. The other one is a speaking business coach. And the third one is just a general business coach. I also have a Navy SEAL that I have hired, which is he's probably one of the most biblical, his knowledge of the Bible is through the roof. And that's why I have him in my corner, but I use him as an accountability guy. So I'm literally thinking right now, I got to meet with him in 2 days. And I'm like racking my head of everything that I haven't done that I told him I'm going to do. And I will get it done because I'm a Navy SEAL too when it comes down to the last moment, right?
Yeah.
I'm going to kick into action and turn into my own Navy SEAL. And it's going to be getting all these things that I've got to get done, right? But there's certain you got to understand, like you need certain people for certain situations and certain people for certain things. And you're always utilizing people to help some sort of weakness. Like I know that I need an accountability person. I need to lay out what I'm going to do. And I need somebody to kind of like be my boss because I'm at the top of my game. I'm the boss of my boss. Like nobody rules over me in this thing. And because of that, I tend to want to do whatever I want, you know?
Yeah.
And, when you've already made it in so many different businesses and, I've already done so many different things. And sometimes there's things inside of me that says, man, you just lay it down now, bro. Like, forget about it. But I know that I don't want to do that. Right. So that's the bad side of me talking. That's that easy side. That's that,
Yeah.
if I laid it down right now, then I'd, probably you go golfing for like 6 months, 10 months. And then next thing you know, you're bored out of your mind and you can't think of anything, but like you're just not doing what you were put here to do. Like, I don't want to be in that situation. So, but I know that I'm inclined to like want to do that. So I'll hire somebody and I know that come, hell or high water, I'm going to have these things finished and I'm going to have, these things delivered to him by the moment that we meet up on Wednesday morning. So, sometimes you got to look at things like what's your weakness, right? What's your weakness? How can you bring people into your life? And I prefer to hire people because I've done the whole thing where me and a buddy start being accountable and then we start letting each other slide and all of a sudden, no,
Yeah.
I'm gonna hire a Navy SEAL. And I'm telling him, like, you better keep me accountable because that's what I'm hiring you to do. And I hate saying this, but I'm saying it and I'm not going to change my mind. You need to keep me accountable on what I say that I'm going to do, or you just need to rip me a new one by the time we get here and we talk because I need it. I won't fire you. You have full reign to rip me a new one anytime that you want. Like I know that I have certain weaknesses and you got to bring people in your life that can account for that. And what I love about the guy, he's really good with priority and I'm not so good with priority. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? I may think that going, out to lunch in the middle of the day on the busiest day that I have in my entire life and driving 45 minutes away to do it because I want to go to this certain place is a good idea.
Yeah.
There's just all kinds of things that I come up with and I'm sitting there thinking like, why did I even do that? Right.
Yeah.
And it's just like, I know what it is. It's because I know that I'm free and I want to be free and I want to do all these things. Right. But I also got all these things that I want to accomplish. And I know that I got to put people in my life that can help me prioritize, that can help me be accountable, all of these things. Like, you just really got to know what you need. In most cases, I'm looking for absolute wisdom. I am looking for somebody. If I want something, like if I wanted to go into a certain kind of business and I want something, like I want somebody that has the experience that can lead me through that and that can navigate that and can just, I'm looking to collapse time at this level. Like the very first thing that I do, and I was talking to the guy, the gutter guy, and I said, man, I said, the very first thing I would do here, I'd be like, I know you're talking to me about it. And that's great. Right. I'm going to help you. But I would go and find somebody who's built a gutter company and sold it. And because he wants to scale it and sell it, once he gets the
Yeah.
franchise, I would go find somebody that built a franchise and sold it.
Someone who had done it.
And yeah, and I would pay them to just give me the recipe, because if you got the recipe, now you got a checklist.
Yeah.
And if you get a checklist, now all you got to do is go to work and check off the boxes. And then after that, you've done your job. You've done your job. Once you got down, you went to work, you checked off all the boxes, you did all the things right. And I can guarantee you, and when you do it that way, you'll get what you'll get what you need in return. But most people just won't go out of their way to ask for that kind of advice or to get that kind of wisdom, or worse, like you said, be led astray by somebody who doesn't even know what they're talking about.
Yeah, that's definitely one thing that we fall for, especially when we're not so mature or where we have strong relationships with relatives that are stronger personality or just as strong of a personality or elder, or when we have amazing respect for them and we feel like we're hurting their feelings, not living up to their expectations and stuff like that. I mean, I left my home when I was 14, and the relationship with my parents now, it's little flipped. It's I'm leading them more than they're leading me. So I didn't take much advice from relatives, but I did take advice from like immediate supervisors that I didn't inspect, by people who were, you know part of my life. And I never asked myself, like, you would ask somebody, "Hey, I'm thinking about buying this property and renting it out." "Oh man, they're not gonna pay you. I used to have a property, and I don't the tenants broke it." And so why would you take advice from a loser? Why would you take advice from someone who failed at what you want to succeed at, and allow scarcity to kill your dreams? So this happens so much, and when I see it happening, like sometimes I would work with salespeople or with younger people or with people who want to achieve something, and when I see how they're led by naysayers and by people who are not experts, but they're so loyal to them, it's insane. And because they feel like they're going to hurt their feelings, so they kill their own dream instead. And it's just a sad thing to witness. And I completely agree with you. But to switch gears, our show is called The Paradigm Shift. And what do you think is happening right now with the world? Because it's not just in America, everything that you saw happening in America. I come from Europe and I've got friends all over the world. Everything that you saw happen in America happened by the same design in every other country. So there was a guy like Fauci in every country. There's all those things with the inflation right now are happening everywhere else. Like Europe is 3 times worse than America because they're so close to Russia. So what do you think are going to be the dynamics of the world? What's your prediction for the next 12 months?
You know what, man? I truly believe that we are going towards. I'm not going to say good times for everybody, but I'm gonna say that I believe that because this world during that amount of time, it was attack against God. In my belief, it was an attack
Yeah.
against God. It was. I believe that it was satanic.
Yeah.
That the devil comes to kill, steal, and destroy. All of them things happen during that time. Think about it. Think about it. People were killing, things were definitely being stolen, and things were being destroyed, and people were
Spiritual
being
warfare
destroyed.
for sure.
So what happens is that you look, God can't be beat. Okay, so this was an attempt. I believe that God is opening up the heavens right now, and He's pouring His Spirit upon this earth, and we're going to see just an intense revival of the church.
Yeah.
We're going to see an intense revival of people's hearts, and we're going to see that God is going to be front and center. And you can't like strip that much of God out of the world without expecting Him to turn around and pour it right back on it. That's just not the way it works. It's just when even generational, when you got less godly generations, the next generation becomes more godly. It's just the
Yeah.
way that it works. So there's going to be a certain amount of God being poured upon the world all the time. And I just truly believe that, man, wherever this takes us, wherever it goes, I believe that it's taking us towards, the glory of Jesus. And I'm in it for the ride, man. Whatever happens, I have no fear. I just truly believe that we're moving towards, bringing that kingdom right here down on earth. And I think that that's going to be the biggest paradigm shift that we actually see. And I've noticed it, like I've seen it. Were you at the $1 Million Mastermind?
Not the last one, but
So the
I've
very
been in the
last
past three.
Man, the very last $1 Million Mastermind, I'm here to tell you, like every speaker was speaking the word of God. When I rolled up, and many of you guys know Ryan, some of you might know Ryan Stewman, but when I rolled up on Ryan Stewman and he had his employees all in a circle, they were all having a prayer gathering. And when Ed Milet came out and delivered probably one of the greatest speeches that I had ever heard delivered, Ed Milet was preaching the word of God up there on the stage. So and just one thing after the next, from Eric Thompson to David Harris was up there.
Eric Thomas.
Eric Thomas and David Harris. And David Harris was up there, the word of God. Like it's
Yeah,
just
he's a
pouring.
godly man.
Yeah, it's just pouring out of people. Yeah, he goes to my church. He's actually in my mastermind, my church mastermind. so
That's
and so
awesome.
he's out there just like pouring it on people. You got guys like, Steve Weatherford, that's just coming out, and I mean just lit and on
Yeah, yeah,
fire.
yeah.
Steve's also in my church mastermind. I love
Steve
that.
is awesome.
So, I'm seeing this huge movement of God. Like I refuse to give the devil any of my time. I don't watch the news. I don't listen to the negative, the stock market's up and down, like these things. I don't worry about scarcity. I don't worry about money, any of that stuff. I'm here like on team God, watching him manifest himself on this earth, and we're going to see a paradigm shift in that way. There's a reason why we were under so much attack, and the world doesn't come under. We don't come under that level of attack unless there is a big movement about to happen with God.
Yeah.
And I'm just so hopeful, and I'm so happy, and I feel so blessed, really, to be living in and through these times. And I mean, it wasn't like that during the whole experience. There was times I was just wondering what was going on. I was like everybody else, like the whole world just became weird to me, and all of these strange things. But I look back at it and I'm just like, man, I can see God moving his hand in so many people's lives right now. I see people's lives changing all the time. People are talking spirit to spirit now, and that's where real transformation happens. I
Yeah.
mean, there's just all kinds of powerful things that are happening in the name of God, and I'm just glad to be a part of that.
And I loved that you gave this particular answer. This is amazing for our listeners and viewers, because so many people have lost hope, and I feel that you're absolutely right. We're about to witness some of the greatest times in history, because there's no fear of contradiction. They're so weak that the demonic side is so weak that they're not even hiding anymore. They're not even in demise. They're like showing they're in their last line of offense, I think.
Yeah, I truly believe that, and we're going to see some things happen. I can faithfully prophesy that and say that God is going to be moving on this earth like we've never seen him move, and things are going to happen. And I just want everybody who listens to this to realize that like right now, if you have God knocking at your door, if he's knocking at your heart, if you're in pain, if you're in suffering, he's waiting for you with open arms. It doesn't matter what your past was. It doesn't matter, who you are today. He's waiting for you in open arms. And, we talk about success coaches and things like that. And I think I told you this earlier, but, the greatest success coach that I have ever had is the word of God and the Bible.
Oh yeah.
In fact, I measure everybody else by that, like that's the truth. That's truth to me. So if another business coach tells me to do something a certain way, I will filter it through the word of God. It's absolute truth to me. So, I'll take the meat and I'll spit out the bones. I'll be like, okay, I like what you said there, but I don't like what you're saying there. Okay, let's keep going.
And
And I'm okay with that.
if you look at some of the most significant success coaches, their whole foundation in their message comes from the Bible. Like
It
Zig
does.
Ziglar is 90% the Bible,
It does.
and
Tom's a good friend of mine.
Even in Think and Grow Rich, even in most of the great books, success have strong foundation and principles and proverbs. It's just that's the book of the truth. I remember being a young man, mid 20s, and at that point, I've always been a Christian by default, but at that point I have not read the Bible like back to back. So I remember being desperate and praying to God. Like, I wish there was just a book with instructions or something like that.
Yeah.
And I read the Bible back to back when I got baptized in the Holy Spirit, and I decided to just focus on the Bible and spend time with God. And I read it back to back, which was another crazy experience. My pastor didn't recommend it at all. He said that's not smart. I'm like, okay, I'll just read it like a book. And going through the Old Testament with the wrath of God and Sodom and all these things, and I'm like, oof, this is intense.
Good thing you
And
didn't stop there.
I didn't stop. Then I remember the first time when I really felt the glory of God, and how really my capacity for God was so much bigger when I read the book of Job, which was so powerful to me. I'm like, look at this guy losing absolutely everything. And I ran it by me. I'm like, what would I do if that happens to me?
Hmm.
And it's just the most encouraging book from the Bible, in my opinion. And then I had these characters, and David is a character that I really admire. And I remember how before I really stepped into walking with God, I had this my own version of God. Like, if you allow David to be a little flexible with the ladies, maybe I could do it like him. Maybe I
Right.
don't do it, you know. And this
We've
all
all lived that version, by the way.
yeah, and there's a lot of great people, and I'm so glad that God picked imperfect people that had character problems, and empowered them with His work, because they are giving us so much hope. And it didn't work out for David because he was disobedient. So there is a lesson there.
Right.
He did went through his struggle,
Yeah.
and Moses could have had a stronger character, and there's a lot of but it gives us hope because we're not perfect,
Hmm.
and half of the Bible are third-degree murderers.
Hmm.
you know
Well,
so
let me tell you something, because we started this, and that's I know there's a lot in there, right? But
yeah,
we started this by talking about the foundation of business coaches and things like that being biblical.
yeah,
But here's the thing, like here's what gets me confused the most is that there's a lot of people out there that think the truth is subjective, meaning that like you have a truth and I have a truth.
exactly,
Our
yeah,
truth is subjective, right? But now get this. Here's how confusing that is, and here's how actually impossible that is to be even true. Is that if I say truth is subjective, then that has to be true. Well, how can that be true if it's subjective?
yeah,
Because if you decide that it's not true, that truth is not subjective, then I can't really say that you're not telling the truth because I said truth was not subjective.
yeah.
You see? So it negates itself, right? There's no substance to it. So, and that was one of the biggest things that I learned about the Bible is that it had truth in it that I could live by and that I could follow. And because of that, now I have something to measure everything to. Because if you don't have truth in your life, if you're not living by principles, you're living by preferences.
Yeah.
Principles never change, preferences change. They're very subjective. Okay. I don't want to live like a stick floating through the water with no aim, no purpose. The only way that you're going to have purpose is finding the truth
Well,
and understanding that it's not subjective because it's impossible. It can't be.
I think
Just by
that,
saying that that's true negates itself.
yeah, and living by principles gives you certainty that is so impeccable. Because you're just doing what is the right thing to do. I mean, a lot of people are like, "Oh, I wonder what God wants me to do." He has been very clear with what he hates and what he loves.
Yep.
So, following those instructions gives you a pretty good direction on what decisions to make.
And I broke it down. I was like sitting there one day and I was thinking about this, and I was thinking about, the 10 commandments and all this kind of stuff, and, sin and really what that means. Right. And the truth that I came to, and the truth that I fully understand, is that God didn't give us these commandments so he could be some sort of ruler over our lives.
Yeah.
He was actually giving us these commandments so we would stop being selfish, and we
Yeah.
would think about other people and other circumstances before we thought about ourselves. And if you look at every single one of the 10 commandments, they hinge on two things: love God with all your heart, and to love your neighbor as you love yourself. It's the two things that Jesus said are the commandments that everything else hinges on that.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, and I don't care what it is, guys. Like, let's talk about something. You got mainly guys on your podcast, right? Let's talk about masturbation in marriage. Okay. Seriously, this is a tough subject, right? And
Yeah.
this is something I had to think about. I'm like, what is masturbation really? What does it hurt? You know what I mean? Or how would it hurt something? Well, here's what it does. All right. And I'm telling you, like, God's not sitting there going, oh crap, there he goes again, right? God, God is looking at this like, wow, he's really, not understanding why I gave this commandment. And here's the reason. You'll find that a lot of divorces and a lot of couples aren't intimate because if the guy can just go do it on his own and just decides to go do it on his own, he'll look over there and be like, well, I don't need her for that. I don't have to go be nice to her or fix this situation because I don't need her for that. Now, you take a guy who needs his wife to pleasure him sexually. If you're a guy like me, I'm gonna fix it, bro. You know what I mean? Like, I'm
Yeah.
gonna fix it just to make it happen. So what happens is when guys go off and they don't need their wife to do these things, they stop being the type of men that they should be towards them, and they stop fixing the things that need to be fixed. So you start living in a much worse condition.
Yeah.
So it was all for God to say, hey, I want you as man and wife to learn how to fix each other, to love each other, to be with each other, to
Right.
sit with
Right.
each other, right? And if you're sitting there going, well, I don't need her because I can do this myself, there's no reason to fix it. There's no reason
Yeah.
to work at it. You're taking the primary driver, and I ain't no saint, believe me. I ain't no saint. I ain't sitting here sitting on some white horse sainting all you guys. Believe me, I'm not no saint. But I'll tell you what I do understand is that not only is that inequity, just like how Adam passed on his sin to everybody else, like from bloodline to bloodline, not only is that inequity passed on or happens in your household because now you and your wife are in this thing where you can do it on your own, you don't need her. So you're not trying to fix things, but your children see that and then they see that's the way a man treats a woman. So now you're passing that inequity on to your kids because they weren't meant to see that. They
Yeah.
weren't meant to see a man treat a woman that way. They were meant to see dad who, you know, was going out there fixing things, and maybe we had this interior motive that God gave us to fix it, right? But we wouldn't, 2 or 3 days and be like, man, I better go talk to her.
Yeah.
And so like even things like that where we don't think is selfish, not only is it selfish to like the relationship that we're in, but it's also selfish to because our dads see, the kids see the way dad treats the wife and they think that's the way you're supposed to treat a woman. And they get that same inequity passed down to them. And that's how it just keeps on going. Pride, for example. I'm gonna tell you this, Valco, because I was a very prideful person. I sat there, I was like, how could pride be selfish, right?
Oh, I'm against pride big time.
Well, yeah, and I used to be very when I drank, it got worse. Like I was the worst when I was on alcohol. It just made me
Mhm.
like a prideful, bloodthirsty. If I wasn't the biggest big shot in the room, like I wanted to destroy the whole room and blow it off planet Earth and take it over. That's just the way I was when I used to do alcohol. It just made me very, very prideful, made me very arrogant, made me very just relentless. I was like wanting to drink the blood from my enemy's skulls, and it just it brought that out of me, and
Yeah.
that's why I don't drink anymore, obviously, right? But so I could remember. So number one, looking across, and you're sitting there and you're thinking you're about to be the big shot. When you're prideful, you're thinking everywhere you're going to be the big shot, right? And then all of a sudden you walk in this room, and then there's somebody across the room that already took that place. The big shot's here. And then all of a sudden you secretly hate this person. You secretly hate this person because they're taking the light away from you. Now, if you go back to the original sin of Satan,
Mm.
the reason why he got cast out of heaven was because he wanted all the light shining on him. But the problem was he wasn't holy and good like God.
Yeah.
God's a conduit for the light. God's the only one that can be trusted with all given all the glory to because he gives it all back. He lights all of heaven with his
Right.
with his glory, and his throne room flows with the rivers of life. Whether you want to believe it or not, it's the truth. And so, he's the only one that can be trusted with all the glory. Satan couldn't be trusted with all the glory, right? But and neither can we. Neither can we. We're not as good as God, man. I'm sorry to say, not this earth, right? So, we're supposed to like be given the glory through us and giving it to God, because this was all given to us by God. And we're just steward of the things that God's given us. The house, that's God's, the money, that's God's. I'm just here to ride this thing out and try to become a better human towards God along the way and do things his way along the way. But, so pride actually, here's the selfish part. So there's a lot of prideful people that can be successful. And I'd go far to say most rich people. There's rich people that are unprideful, and then there are the ones that are really living life. But there's rich people like me who was prideful, and I was secretly dying inside. Like when I went places, like here's a problem. If you got to be the big shot everywhere you go, there's always going to be somebody bigger. There's always going to be somebody higher. By the time you're the biggest person in the room, you don't care about that room anymore, because now you're looking for the next room. And there's always somebody higher. So you live your entire life in pain. And other people are seeing this, and prideful people are good at hiding it. Prideful people are good at making other people think that their way is the right way. So you got people that are trying to model you, and what you're doing with your actions, you're leading people astray. So just with who you are, the way you act, and the way that you show up, it is selfish in nature. And because of that, you are affecting everybody around you, because you're going to get, I had people, when I was real prideful, man, I had people walk to me. I had this one dude walk to me one day, goes, dude, it must be great to be you, dude. You know what I mean? Like, he's like, wow. And I just see him with his eyes wide open, and he's looking at me. I just got off speaking off the stage. And I'm just like, I'm sitting there thinking like, yeah, it is, and it wasn't, that great to be me at that time. And, it says, if you try to exalt yourself, you're going to be humbled. You're going to be humiliated. But if you're humble, you'll be exalted.
Yeah. Well, I think exactly the same way on pride, and don't use this. When I see my daughter accomplishing something, I tell her I'm so pleased with you. I'm so fortunate to get to be your dad. I'm so grateful to
Well, you
be
can
here.
be proud of somebody. Proud is different than pride.
But look,
Oh,
I even stay away from that, because I feel that pride and proud, and it's slowly and silently, and it's sneaking into the church. And even I hear it from
look a little bit further into proud though, man, because I'm just telling you, look into the word proud. Like my pastor's like a wordsmith, and he had this long talk. I'm just telling you, like, just look a little bit deeper into the world.
I will.
because
Yeah.
proud's a totally different thing. Like you are giving it all to somebody else, and it's not self-centered.
But there has to be a better word, though.
It is getting a little too close. I was on that kick too, man. I'm like, should I even say I'm proud of
Only
anything?
only because,
Yeah.
when you say to your kid, "I'm proud of you," it's like,
You're right.
okay, what did
You're right.
you
If you're getting deep into the words, and honestly, it was probably worded different in the Hebrew language, in the original language.
It was probably,
It
yeah.
was probably worded way different. That might be something to actually research, because we
Yeah.
might just have to come up with a new word for it.
Only because I feel that when you put in a lot of effort, and there's a lot of parents that would take their child away from their calling, and would, abuse them in a way to achieve something. And the child will obey to their parents, and they will achieve something. And regardless if they're fulfilled on the inside, the parents would say, "I'm proud of you," because they're fulfilling themselves. But by that, many times they take the glory from God. Like, God gave your child this talent. It
That's
wasn't you in the bedroom with your husband thinking, "Wow, it would be cool if our kid can, do this. Let's work on that. Turn around," right?
I like it,
No,
man.
it's it's not how it works, right? So God pours the gifts. We need to recognize Him in those gifts, especially when they're manifesting with our children. So that's how I see it. And it's just, you're right. You're right. People don't have bad intention when they say that, especially to their children. People don't have bad intention when they say that to their mentees or to their people that they're leading. And it's really pure love. But just, I got a problem with the word, because I feel like what kicked out the devil? That must be the worst thing. That must be one of the things that God hates the most, probably. You know, and for some reason, you see all this like the
Well,
seven
well,
deadly sins.
well, the reason why Velcro is because it comes from a spiritual place. It comes from the spirit of hell.
Yeah,
The pride does. A lot of other sins are very animalistic. I mean, they're very
yeah,
body driven.
you're right. You're right.
It comes from a spirit, a feeling, a
Good.
way,
That's a
and it's
great
the
point.
only one that makes you hate the other person. Like two murderers go to jail, you got something in common. If they're both on death row, there's plenty of murderers that are probably sitting there talking to each other. But if you get two prideful people together, they can't stand each other.
I think two things get you out of your character, like almost like Star Trek. You know, like you're almost like, wow, I was just out of my being for a while,
Yeah,
and it's pride
yeah,
and sex.
yeah,
You know, like in the moment, you make a mistake, and you're like, man, what was I thinking? That was not me. Like, where was I in the whole process of this? And in the state of pride, you could go completely 180 on your character. You could go and do something that's way outside of your character, like you've never done before, because in that you're feeding that state,
yeah.
and it's so dangerous. So I just stay away from it. I'm like, don't go there. Don't open that door. And maybe that's why I just took extra measures to stay away from pride, because I was super proud. I was egocentric, like it was all about me, and it served me well. When you said there's a lot of successful people, it served me well. I was ruthless, and proud, and I was successful based on the universal measurement of success. But I was dead on the inside, and I found no one at that top. I went to the top, and it was lonely. And
Hmm.
I remember I had like 2 3 years, 4 years where I was very proud and just on the grind, and I was focused for selfish reasons, you know, and it ruined my relationships. And I remember I had money, and I wanted to invite 30, 40, 50, maybe 60 people on a party and really, really make it big, And I invited them, and only three people showed up. And I was like, wow. And those three people, they always show up anyways. Those are three people you hope they don't show up. so
They're just there to
so
eat free
so
food.
that was a wake up call for me. I'm like, wow, this is the end. And
And
deep
that
inside
crushed
you,
your pride, didn't it?
oh yeah, deep inside you know it, but you don't know how to heal. Only Jesus can help you heal, because there's shame, there's guilt, there's so many other things that you neglected through the years. And then to go back to the masturbation thing, because that's another thing. As when I started walking with God, I had this my version of God with justifying it with Bible characters, and that was the last piece, to stay pure, to get rid of that, because sexual drive, as they mention even in Think and Grow Rich, is the main source of energy for us. It's not nutrition. Maybe is maybe 20-30%, but sex drives.
So no, I had a revelation on that. That's called sexual transmutation. And
Yeah.
I meditated on that a while before I really figured it out. And I'll be honest with you, like I was talking to this guy who lived in Tennessee, southern part. And his name is Jeremy. He's like, yeah, man. He goes, man, I almost got this account laid down. He's got his business, he's getting into this
Mhm.
account. He's getting into a car dealership. And I'm not gonna say what he said, but he said pretty much that he's like, I almost got my penis in there. He didn't say it in them words. He goes, I almost got it in. And I'm sitting there like thinking about what he said, and I'm thinking about Napoleon Hill sexual transmutation. And it just came to me. I'm like, that's our desire to create.
Yeah.
And so the drive for business is to create. We're creators by nature,
Yeah.
but that drive comes from the ultimate creator, which is God. And
It's
here's the
the
thing.
seed, man. We got the seed.
And what do they call people that just sit around all day, jerking it? You're a jerk off,
That's the other thing.
right? So
In
here,
every language, in every language,
yes,
The worst thing you can call a guy is a jerk
It's a
off.
jerk
Is
off.
someone who masturbates.
Yeah, all the time, and it's because that's a false creation. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? It's like sitting there with a desire to create, but instead of actually sexually doing it with somebody or finding whatever or going out and creating, they're taking that energy and they're just wasting it
Yeah.
in a moment. And I found that the more drive, because how do you feel like even after you have sex or you feel tired, man? You just ready to lay down, go to bed because the hunt is gone. That's out of you,
Yeah.
right? The sexual transmutation Napoleon Hill was talking about was taking that desire, and you got to have it to use it, right? And focusing on it, something else.
Channeling that
Channeling it
energy.
on, yep, yep. And you know what you're going to find is that I don't know if you're anything like me, but you're with your wife or with your lady, and you're in the mood to do something with them. You're going to like jump through hoops and do anything possible to actually do that, right?
Yeah.
And
I
and
mean,
I
that's
mean,
been
you
proven
become
through
brave.
history.
You become brave in many ways. And man, I was a ladies' man back in the day. I mean, I wasn't a Christian, when I was younger. And I mean, I was like, just went girl after girl after. And my wife knows about this. She was friends with two girls that I was dating at the same time. And in my prime at an early age, I had 14 girls that I was dating at the exact same time. And I just had this thing broken down to science, bro. And I mean, it's so funny. My wife one day she tells me, she goes, you would have been like a womanizer. I'm like, what is a womanizer? And I go and look it up, and it's like this guy that just has sex with women and just goes from woman to woman to woman. And I was like, back when I grew up, they called that just like a horny dude.
Yeah.
Like, and now you guys made a name out of it and call her like call like me a womanizer. It sounds like I'm beating women or something like that. I'm like, this is so unfair. What do you call And she was, well, they do call women this, and I'm like, oh, okay, well, yeah, that's true, right? But now you call it a womanizer, and but anyhow, I mean, that was like a core of my being at a very early age, and I understand it. But what I also understand is because I was so good at it then, meaning that I had so many women and so many girls at a very early age. And through, I mean, all the way from, bro, when I was like 12 years old, all the way till, I met my wife. I mean, I can't even tell you how many girlfriends I had and how many, just one after the next. And I would do anything. Like I became an individual I was a magician, bro, of like learning how to do it. And when I'm taking this, and the reason why I'm telling this story, I mean, we just literally talk the word of God, but I'm telling you this story so we can relate it right back to Napoleon Hill and
Yeah.
what that desire is. So what that's saying is that you got to have that hunger, like I had as that crazy kid who was not saved by Jesus, clearly. And but I was going after this one thing. You got to have that desire when it comes to business. You got to literally
Exactly.
like you got to be making plans all the time and thinking about like, well, if this doesn't work, what am I going to say now? And like, well, okay, well, if this person doesn't work, who am I going to go next? Right? What company am I going to go next? Who am I going to approach next? And that's the desire that's got to come through you that actually produces and brings success.
Yeah, it's definitely, history has proven it. The biggest wars have happened because of women, like the Troy and all those things, because of that sexual desire. And what when you made that connection, it's so true because we are creators. We are made in His image, and we have the seed. We know that we have the seed of life. So when you realize and when you put the exact value on that seed, you don't want to waste it on napkins or on easy girls or something like that. Because there's another aspect. Just like growing up, I was definitely experiencing so much variety that I didn't even have a serious relationship until like 22 because I I would move on. I had pleasure of of
You were, yeah.
moving on and just seeing. I'll tell you something that's really terrible. When I was in my teens, I would date girls and I would seduce them, and then I would tell them to cut their
Me
hair.
and you were cut from the same cloth, bro.
I
How
would tell them.
Jesus ever stumbled up on us,
I have
I will
no idea.
never know.
And I would tell them that their faces are so beautiful that they need to cut their hair so
Yeah.
they could open up their face. That's really nasty. And then they would go and cut their hair, and then I'll be like, I wish you didn't cut your hair, and things like that. It was really bad. But I fell into a bad relationship because of bad intentions. When you start something with bad intention, it never leads to anything good. And and then I had another really bad relationship from the long-term relationships, and then I went into a spree of massive global exploration. Like I wanted to experience every single race and every single type. And you say I had it down to a science. I also had it down to a science, and I was going to like 4 dates a week, and I had an execution. And
Velko, could you imagine if somehow you could like put your business at the level that you were doing
I
that?
know, but I implemented a lot of my sales techniques into the
Of
seduction.
course.
So like I would go and be like, hey, what's the ideal end of this date? And depending on their answer, I know what's my next word. I had word tracks for it was yeah. So exactly. So hey, why don't we just pay for the check and move on?
Hey man, yeah. We had a good one, brother. Yeah, so that's good. That's good, man. So
But hey, in closing, what are some words of encouragement for the viewers?
you know what, man? I just think like the words of encouragement I would give to the viewers is just, stop getting sucked into all of this crap that's going on around you. Stop allowing the news to dictate and to rule your life. Look, if you can do it, if you're a Christian and you just feel like, you heard us talk about some things, you heard us talk about Jesus, you heard us talk about God, and you want to get deeper and further into that, then what I recommend is giving your first 30 minutes to an hour every single day, opening up the Word of God, studying the Word of God, learning and studying the things that's on your heart. I'm here to tell you that will absolutely change your life. And the biggest and best thing that I've ever done is just given my heart to God. That's just
Yeah.
completely changed my life. And it's not of my own accord. There's a lot of people that struggle with just following after, one trend after the next, and they go through like a David Goggins book and they get a little bit of, going on there, and then they realize they can't live that anymore, and they go on to the next book and the next book and the next book, and they follow the next influencer and the next influencer and the next influencer. I mean, you guys that are doing that, you really need principles in your life. I truly want to tell you to give your heart to Jesus Christ, give it a try, get out the Bible, learn the principles that are in the Bible. It's the best success book that you're ever going to read. And then after that, you can read any other book that you want. You can go check out anything that you want, because now you've got something to measure the truth in that book. Like I can read a David Goggins book just fine, but I know that when he says that his whole intention is to steal people's souls, while he's doing things, like I know that God says that that's not the way that you should be. So
Yeah.
because of that, I believe that, because if David Goggins really lives in that, he's hiding some pain, some very deep pain,
Yeah.
that he's probably still dealing with from the terrible childhood the guy had to deal with. If you ever read the book, the
I
first
think
book,
he says that he wants to steal the soul of evil, though. Like I think that's what he means, that there's always evil, and I think he's going to extreme levels,
of course, of course.
which
But
is.
there's what I'm telling you guys is, if you're
But
going
you're
from
right. I'm with
place
you.
to place, from thing to thing to thing, and from person to person to person, I've met a lot of influencers, and people have met me and have been disappointed. I already know that, right? So I know that I've met people in certain circles, and at conventions and certain industries, and maybe I just met 80 people, and you're the 85th, and I'm just tired of it, and now you're disappointed, right? Because it was the first time you had a chance to meet me. Well, if you look at Jesus, he never disappointed anybody, and anybody who ever reached out for him, he had arms wide open for them. And some people, I got asked this question the other day, is like, is Jesus Christ is more like William Wallace and Braveheart, or Mother Teresa? And the answer to that question was both,
Yeah.
because it just depends who you were. So if you were in need of a friend, if you were in pain, if you were suffering, then Jesus was like Mother Teresa, and he was like the best thing that could ever happen. But if you were arrogant and prideful, and like the Pharisees, and you were putting the pain on the backs of the poor, and then he was like William Wallace on Braveheart. I mean,
Yeah.
he had these two types of his personality where, it really just depended who you were. And that's the way that we are supposed to be in this earth. So, by giving your life to Christ doesn't mean that you're going to be Mother Teresa for the rest of your life. It means that you're going to be fierce as a lion in the moments that you need to be. And it says in the Bible that God gave us a spirit of power, love, and self-discipline. And, it says power first,
Yeah.
right? And then it says of love, and then of self-discipline. And them are the three things that if you can do that, you're going to live an incredible life. And there's going to be times when you're going to have to show up as the bravest you can possibly be. I mean, that's a cardinal virtue, is courage. And there's going to be times that you're going to have to show up tender and caring, because that's who you are. And just know that by giving your life to Christ, don't believe the enemy. Don't believe the devil that you're going to be one certain type of way. Just know that that's going to be a path to you leading and being the best you that you can absolutely be. And that's just the one advice that I can give anybody who listens to any of this. Because if I gave you guys any other advice or any kind of like motivational, jargon, I would honestly be leading you astray and doing you a disservice, because that's really not what's truly changed my life.
Yeah.
And so what's truly changed my life is spending. I spend every day. I spend about an hour, or sometimes longer, sometimes less, depending on what I got going on. I spend it in the Word of God. I spend it in research. I spend it thinking. I spend it in prayer. I spend it in worship. And I don't do this religiously. I do it out of love. That's really the one thing I look forward the most to all day long, is my 1 hour that I get in the morning, where I just get to be there with God, and I get to explore my heart, and I get to receive His revelation, which is Him revealing His word to me. And you'll get to the point to where you just hunger it, and you'll be filled with it. And it is the deepest problem that we have in our heart that we're trying to solve. The reason why you're going from person to person to person to thing to thing to thing to solve all these problems, like that, it's not going to be solved until you come to this one conclusion. And I know, because I tried over and over and over and again and again and again. And it wasn't until I came to this that I can actually now live with joy. And the beautiful thing about joy, it's different than happiness. Happiness is a fleeting emotion. It comes and it goes. Joy is something that's deep seated, and you can be sad but still have joy. And
Yeah.
that's one of the gifts that God gives you. And you can start freeing yourself. You can free yourself from these things. Velko, I used to have this problem because I grew up poor, where I was scarcity was my problem, right? I would make a ton of money, and then I would start, worrying about it and all these things, and it just started over consuming me. And I was just doing all these things, trying to protect it all the time, and all this stuff, right? And it even had me to where I would wake up in the middle of the night thinking about it, and all these things, right? So scarcity was like a big driver to me. And then one day I woke up and I said, you know what? I said, I'm going to take dominion over that, because that's not from God, because it's not in the Word of God. It doesn't say anything in the Word of God. The Word of God is full of abundance and abundance thinking, and He wants to give you the entire kingdom, which is, the if you could imagine everything you can buy in this world, and then imagine like a world that's a billions and billions and billions of times bigger, like the whole thing, He desires to pour that on your head, and that's said by Jesus Christ Himself. And so God's not a small thinker, and He doesn't fall into scarcity. So, I had to call that out, and I had to dismiss it from my life, just like one of the sins that we were talking about,
Yeah.
that we've had to dismiss from our life. I had to dismiss this thing out of my life. I had to cast it out, and I had to get intentional about it. And I had to do it in prayer, and passionate prayer, asking God to take this away from me. And He took it away from me. He took away every fear that I've ever had. And I can genuinely say that I live. If I have any fears, I guess if you probably snuck up behind me with a snake or something like that, I'd probably jump. Right? There's that type of fear. But I don't have any deep seated fears that are controlling my life, that are scaring me, that are keeping me in any kind of bondage or anything like that. And I think I'm speaking to somebody out there, because I believe a lot of us live with this underlying fear of something, and it's plaguing our life. It's draining our spirit. And I'm just here to tell you that the Word of God, you can command that out. It will leave you, and it will give you a new life. It'll give you the life that you're supposed to have. And that's my advice. I mean, that's my words of wisdom, because I could say whatever I want to say, but every situation is different. And when the Spirit of God gets in you and starts working on you, and you allow the Spirit of God to continue to work on you and continue to reveal things to you, that eventually all of that's going to be gone, and you're going to be in such a better place. Like, I can't even articulate how it'll work, because the Spirit of God will work through you differently than any man or any book or anything like that could possibly do. So, don't think you're going to become some weird dude. Don't think you're going to become some strange person. Don't think that you're going to become any kind of way other than who you were meant to be.
Well, that's a great end to the conversation. And I think what you said about the 10 commandments is really applicable to any business. There's 10 commandments in business itself, like about cash flow, about time management, about stuff like that. And we both learned the hard way that if you don't follow those commandments, eventually you will have to be forced to follow them because it's better for your business and it's better for your life.
The biggest commandment you'll ever learn in business is what Apostle Paul said: whatever you do, do it as to God, not to man. So if you're doing your work, do it as if you're doing it to God. And I mean, that means everything. as you're preparing it and giving it to God, not to man. And when you do that, you're gonna start. That's the biggest, the greatest commandment that I've ever received that's changed my business life, is because I started looking at things like, okay, well, I'm going to do this as I'm giving it to God. That means I'm not going to skimp on anything. And there's a
Yeah.
lot of times when I sit down with my clients, and my clients pay me a lot of money, and I sit down with them and I say, I don't know what you guys were doing before I got here, but it's not what we're going to be doing moving forward. And I say, B, and I tell their whole team that. I say, from here on out, we got a saying in here. It means we do what's right. The second thing is that you operate your business with love for you, yourself, because if you don't, you'll let people shortchange you. Love for your people that you work with, love for your products, love for your clients. And if you do that, you won't do the convenient thing of letting something slide by your nose.
Yeah.
And when you do call it out, and when you do approach an employee, when you approach a situation, you're going to be doing it out of love. The intention's going to be there. The intention's going to be right. It's not going to be out of hate. It's not going to be out of jealousy. And because of that, people will listen to you, because they're going to know that you're doing it out of love. I sit down with my employees and I say, hey man, you're doing this and this really well, but I seen something the other day and I want to talk about it because I believe it's hurting our clients. And, we need to sit down and really talk about it, because that I love you, I love myself, and I love my clients. And if something comes across my desk and to my attention, it's not acceptable the way that it is. Conflict is going to cause growth in your business. Love is conflict. Okay. Love is intervention. There's people that love people when they see them on drugs. They got to stop. They got to intervene.
Yeah.
And they got to bring people in for an intervention. And that's out of love. And you got to be willing to do that, because that conflict and that change that is caused from the conflict is going to cause growth. So I don't go into my business every day just looking for lottie-dottie, happy, dappy. I'm walking in love, but love is passionate. Love is fierce, man. And I'll be passionate and I'll be fierce, and I'll sit down with people and I'll say, hey man, like, here's what's happening. And when here's what happens when you understand the word of God, you start to see everything clear. So everything beneath that becomes clear. People's intentions become clear. You see when things are working against you, you see when they're working for you. And you get a vision into the way things work, because you understand the way the thing works. Okay. So everything beneath that becomes clear. And, in business, them two things, if you follow that, that's a key to wealth. Who doesn't want to work with somebody that does it out of love, man?
Love always wins.
And we've been scolded by supervisors before, but we're like, that dude's just doing that because he's an asshole.
Yeah.
Right. But what if he came at it differently? And I always compliment my people first. I always try to look for good things. Everybody has something amazing about them. Hey, I even got to say, hey man, I love the way you took your grandma to the grocery store the other day. But here you're screwing everything up. It doesn't matter. I'm gonna find something like, hey man, I love your smile, bro. But guess what? Here's what's happening. Here's what I'm seeing. And you got to explain to people, you got to really be courageous in a lot of situations. It takes a lot of uncomfortable conversations, but that's where your biggest growth is going to be. It's the little problems that we let slide by every day, or, somebody does something and we just let it go. That makes it to where, we create an environment. You become a thermometer, not a thermostat. You just go with the temperature of whatever gets thrown at you every day. No, I'm a thermostat, man. I'm gonna set the temperature right here. And when I walk in the room, the temperature is going to be set right there. Okay. It doesn't go below this deal. So when I come into a business meeting, when somebody works for me, when I work with somebody, even if they're my client, right, here's the temperature, it's set. And with me, you don't get anything below that temperature. I'm not a thermostat. I don't go based on your moods. I don't go based on how you feel. Any of these things. Right here is the standards, and that's what we keep.
That's awesome. Well, Mr. Highley, it's been an honor to spend some time with you. There was a lot of wisdom. So I encourage you guys to watch this show one more time or listen to it one more time. There was so much that you'll find in listening the second time. It was just a lot of wisdom shared by the marketing savage. Where can people find you? How can people hire you? And how can people sign up? I know I'm a member of the Inner Circle, and it's definitely been a blessing in my life, and the Church of the Savage as well. It's fast growing community.
But right now, I'm just going to encourage people, if you want to get to know me, you want to hang out, if you were interested, in some of the things that we were talking about, specifically about Jesus and about God, is head on over to the Facebook group of the Church of the Savage. Every Sunday night I go live And I got a great group, and we just started it recently. And to be honest with you, it's got about 1,000 people in the group, so it's not a huge group, but I love the people that show up. It's just a great environment. It's a great thing, and I'm really cherishing the moment that we have right now when it's small, because we got some pretty big plans and
Yeah.
for the future. So I'm really cherishing these moments, and I'd love to have you guys as part of that moment. And you know that's what's most important to me, is that you have a good life, but you do it the right way. I just want to shed God's truth, and I'm just a messenger. I'm not somebody who came up with any of these ideas or any of these things. I'm just somebody who's just teaching something that I learned, and I'm just telling you how it affected my life, how it's changed my life, and what it's done for me. So because of that, I'd like you to be a part of that. If that's what you're interested in, and you feel that in your heart, just go over to the Church of the Savage Facebook group and request a membership. I'll let you in.
Awesome. You're a meek man, John.
I appreciate that, my man.
Make it a great day. Thank you for this.
All right, brother. We'll see you, man.